In 2019, I reported on the disappearance of Shaun Ritchie, who disappeared from the remote village of Stricken, around 8 miles south of his hometown of Fraserburgh. This, of course, is in Scotland. Shaun disappeared in 2014, and a lot of the details surrounding the disappearance has changed, or rather have become more clear, but the disappearance itself still remains as one of the more unusual ones that I've covered. So Shaun was 20 years old at the time of his disappearance, and it was a Halloween night, the 31st of October 2014. Something completely out of the ordinary would happen on this night, and Shaun would never be seen again to this day, which is almost 8 years later now. Shaun's sister, Nicole, relayed that he had left the house earlier that day and was meeting up with friends, seemingly to celebrate Halloween and to enjoy the day and attend parties and things like that. It's important to note that Fraserburgh is a small town with a population consisting of around 12,500 people, and apparently it's a very tightly knit community. Shaun's friends say that he was well known to many people there and was well liked. His friends describe him as a very bright lad, witty, friendly, a bit of a joker, and not the type of person to have enemies or cause animosity. In any case, Shaun's mother saw him at around 10 PM that night at some of the local shops. She asked him there if he'd be home later, and he said that he would. It seems that his mum was a bit worried because he didn't have a phone with him, but he just told her not to worry and that he'll just see her later. Shaun's mum would later recall that at the time Shaun was with 7 other people that night. 6 of them, Shaun included, were getting into the back of a van, and there was the driver and the front seat passenger, making a group of 8 in total. This was the group of friends that were going to be spending time together that night, celebrating Halloween and partying. Shortly after this meeting with his mum, the group left to the Balaclava bar, and this seems to have been just after 10 PM that they arrived. It seems that this group of 8 had stayed at the bar for a while, and Danny, one of Shaun's good friends, came in. The pair saw each other. Danny wasn't sober at this point in the night, and the pair shared a hug and joked with one another. At this point, I'm going to quote and paraphrase the lead investigator of Shaun's disappearance, D. Martin McDougall. Shaun went out that Friday night with some of his friends. They remained in that pub for some time during the night. A group of them later met more friends in the town centre and were walking away from the centre to Watermill Road, where they met 2 more people that were known to them. Their intention seems to have been to go to a party. What happened then after is that they had got in the van. The driver of the van has a relative who stays around 4 or 5 miles from Fraserburgh in a rural farm area, and that's where they went. There was an issue in the van with one of them and the driver. The driver of the van thought that maybe something bad could happen between them, so he drove the group to his brother's. He went inside the farmhouse to get his brother. At this point, the rest of them had gotten out of the van, fearing something may happen, and they then left the area. Now, because there were 6, including Shaun, they'd gone in different directions as they left the van. 3 went in one direction, 2 went in the other direction, and each group thought that Shaun was with the other. To clarify, it doesn't seem that Shaun was actually a participant in this disturbance, nor the others. From what I can work out, it seems to have been between one in the back and the driver, but fearing things may turn ugly, the others fled from the scene. Shaun, unfortunately, picking a direction that looks to have put him by himself. Shaun's sister explained that this group had gone to Kersey Hill Farm, which again is a remote farmhouse. The details are somewhat hazy, but it seems that this disturbance we're talking about was that one person in the back of the van chased another, the driver I'm assuming, with an axe. Now obviously that sounds rather extreme, but let's apply some further context from D. Martin, which I've paraphrased. Many people believe that a 999 call was made from the owner of the farmhouse, the driver's brother, to the police asking for help. It wasn't actually a 999 call, it was a 101 call, and this is quite a significant difference. To those not from the UK, the difference being is that a 999 call is made in the case of an emergency, the same as a 911 call. However, a 101 call is used to seek help for something when it's not considered emergency. This might be medical advice, or if a crime has been committed but wasn't a direct emergency. So you'd feel that if someone was being chased by someone else with an axe, that might be worthy of a 999 call, not a 101 call. I'm no expert of course, but that kind of does sound like an emergency, you know? If there was someone chasing me with an axe, I might feel that having the police around would be a good thing. D. Martin also clarifies that after the 101 call was made, another came through shortly thereafter, explaining that nothing was actually wrong and that this incident was a Halloween prank that had gone wrong. This seems to have been further corroborated by a picture that was uploaded and later removed from Facebook that night of some of the group with the caption, "Halloween prank gone wrong." I don't know who exactly was in the picture. D. Martin explains that the 6 in the back were all drinking and that there wasn't really any evidence to point to anything untowards, and that one of them in the back, Axe Guy I'm presuming, was winding the driver up in jest, and it doesn't appear to have been anything significant. He then said that there was no information or evidence to suggest that Shaun had been removed from the area by another person, meaning that after exiting the van, it seems that he bolted off in one direction, not understanding the nature of the prank. This seems to be the view of law enforcement as far as I can tell. This point was then furthered with the statement that every person in the van and the owner of the farmhouse, the brother, had been interviewed at least 4 times, and all of the accounts remain consistent. He added that all efforts of the investigations do not substantiate the idea that Shaun had come to harm in the form of criminality. This is very important, as you'll come to see soon, and it also, perhaps, makes this whole incident very strange, which we'll get to in a moment. It is important to note first though, that the other 5 men in the back did make it home okay. So just to clarify one final time, one in the back gets out with an axe and is acting aggressive towards the driver. The driver's then chased, I think, and everyone seems to feel that the situation is real, or at least partially with the 101 call. Shaun and the others in the back bolt off in different directions, and that's where we are now. Shaun's got out the van, ran off, and was never seen again. Shaun wasn't actually realised as missing until Sunday, which is 2 days after the events of that night. It seems that some of the group in the back of the van had tried contacting Shaun, but he wasn't answering. This led them to contacting Shaun's mum on the Sunday and asking if he was home, but of course they were told no. The mum simply stating that she thought that he was still with them. They then told the mother about the disturbance that happened that night and presumed Shaun had made it home as they did. Let's get bizarre now and explore the circumstances, unusual findings, and the search effort. At the time of Shaun's disappearance, his father Charlie was working abroad, but after he found out what had happened, he made his way back home and went straight to the search area and met with detectives there. At this time of the year, which was now very early November, the temperatures in this area were very cold and the area itself was very rugged and the terrain very harsh. Charlie was told by the detectives that they didn't believe that there was much hope in finding Shaun alive. The search effort was massive, and while specific numbers aren't given, it was said that the area was just flooded with people, hundreds and hundreds, professional searchers, law enforcement, many volunteers from Fraserburgh who wanted to help. This effort was actually able to indicate Shaun's direction of travel. A short distance away in this direction, away from the farmhouse, Shaun's lighter was found in an area with flattened grass. This is interesting because it immediately raises the question, why was the grass flattened? This means that something heavy had been sat right there. Was that Shaun? Was he laying down? If he was, why? And was he hiding? And if so, from who? It's unlikely to mean just a fall, because getting up quickly generally wouldn't flatten the grass in the same way as being there for a while would. Though I suppose he could have tripped and then stayed on the ground for a while, but at first glance, it's certainly a possibility that he may have been trying to hide. Why though, isn't clear. In any case, the working theory was that the lighter had probably fallen out of his pocket during whatever ordeal had taken place there. After this, it looks as though Shaun had got back up, got on a track and walked further down it. For some reason, he looks to have left the track and made his way onto a field. I say this because that's where the next discovery was made. On this field, to the left of the track, Shaun had abandoned his belt, which is odd and raises the next question. Why did Shaun leave the track? Generally, tracks are going to lead you somewhere, but for one reason or another, Shaun decided to leave it and head onto the field. Why? Did he not feel comfortable on the track? Did he feel a bit exposed there? Was something making him feel fearful or panicky? Or was there some other reason that he did this? Perhaps he simply thought that he was taking a shortcut? Whatever the case may be, under what circumstances does it make sense to remove the belt and abandon it there in the field? Beyond this field lies a fence, which Shaun appears to have climbed over because in the adjacent field his shoes were found. So he hasn't just removed his belt and climbed a fence, he's continued on for a while and then removed his shoes. Why? Again, this area was already rugged and harsh, and now he's abandoned his shoes, which would inevitably make it much more difficult to traverse this area. Further on from the shoes, his hoodie was found. Here's a paraphrased quote from Charlie. The search was extensive and couldn't be criticised. Every outbuilding was thoroughly searched, alongside even the harshest of terrain, for miles and in every direction. The police threw everything they had at this search. When Shaun's top and shoes were found within the first few days, authorities said, "We are really confident that we're going to find him now. He can't be far." I don't think Shaun's here because 1, we haven't found him, and 2, because I believe it would have been impossible to walk out of this area in the dark and with no shoes. There were police helicopters that searched from here, Kersey Hill Farm, to Fraserburgh, filming everything, and this is at the same time that boots were on the ground and with people searching, and he would have been found if he was here, no question. D. Martin seemed to think that this was unusual too. He stated that the search operation went on for several weeks because more and more members of the public kept coming to help search the fields and the wooded areas. He also said that there were many search dogs on the scene too. I think it was around 30. Of course, given the fact that Shaun has never been found, I think it's safe to say that they didn't find his scent. Going back to Charlie for a moment, he gave some more details about the search and the area. Paraphrasing, he said that the weather had worsened during the search and it was raining a lot. The entire grass area had become very boggy and swampy. The terrain was so uneven and harsh that one police officer had quite badly injured his leg while looking for Shaun. The searchers, including Charlie, were forced to wear full waterproof gear including high boots and raincoats, etc. He also said that as they'd be searching these areas, suddenly you'd just be engulfed waist deep in mud. So understandably, this clearly was not a very pleasant or easy place to search. His final words on the circumstances. For Shaun to walk out of here, no shoes, in the dark, over all these obstacles, and then to get out over barbed wire fences is, in my opinion, nigh on impossible. Couldn't be done. Just further on that point, D. Martin said this, just assume paraphrase whenever I'm quoting here. Everyone thinks that the area was just farm and fields, but this terrain where the clothes were found isn't terrain that's habitable. It's not farmed by farmers, it's uneven bogland. It's full of pooled water and deep water areas. It was a very difficult area to search. During the search, the remains of a large animal were found. This is an animal that the farmer hadn't seen in 3 years. What D. Martin was getting at was the fact that it's very unlikely that any further information will be uncovered from this area because it's not traversed at all by members of the public. Meaning that dog walkers don't go there, so it's unlikely that anything will be found over time, accidentally. Nicole relayed that after the clothing had been discovered during the first few days, they brought the clothing to their home to gain clarity on whether or not it definitely belonged to Shaun. She said that the jumper was a grey colour, but in the clear bag, they could see that it was very muddy up to the waist area, and the shoes were very muddy too. Meaning that it appears as though Shaun had been inside a bog that night, potentially wading through muddy water at waist height. Law enforcement brought in a forensic scientist, Professor Lorna Dawson from the James Hutton Institute, to examine the mud on the clothing. Lorna had said that the mud on the clothing was very similar to the ground it was found on, meaning that the clothes probably hadn't been moved and were found where they had been discarded. Important to note that on the clothing themselves, there was no sign of injury in the sense that it didn't appear that an axe or anything like that had been used. Diving units were then brought in alongside ground-penetrating radars. These devices were used in grid searches along the entire length of the areas in which the clothing was found, but they never picked up anything to suggest that Shaun was there. Interestingly, on that point of the clothing, Lorna said that what they found on the shoes and hoodie were consistent with being in the fields as well as the pond area. The belt, though, had a different community of bacteria, meaning that the belt didn't seem to have been in the same location as the shoes and the hoodie. This does perhaps indicate that Shaun had removed and abandoned this belt before entering the waist-high watery mud. Charlie clarified by saying that the police dive unit teams searched the bog and surrounding bogs to which the hoodie was found, but all they uncovered was the skeleton of the horse. So to put it simply, Shaun wasn't there. So we have a few camps that have spawned now. Law enforcement, who could find absolutely no sign of foul play, instead seeming to suggest that it looks like there wasn't any third-party involvement at all, and it looks as though Shaun had wandered out there and I suppose eventually succumbed to the elements. Shaun's sister, however, stated that she didn't believe Shaun left the area alone. instead insisting that it is her belief that he was taken away from the farmhouse. She reasons that if it was an accident initially, or later became an accident, his body would have been there, but it wasn't. Which is a very good question. Where did Shaun's body end up? This was a very extensive and exhaustive search effort that had all resources thrown at it, but it was never able to find Shaun. I actually completely agree with Charlie that after ditching the shoes, it became impossible to leave the area. So where did he go? Dive teams searched all bodies of water in the area and found nothing. Grid searches found nothing. The search dogs found nothing, and helicopters found nothing. All available evidence seems to point to the idea that Shaun was alone, removed his belt, his shoes and his hoodie, abandoned them, and then somehow disappeared from the face of the earth. The running hypothesis must be that Shaun had got wet, it was very cold, so he must have started to suffer from hypothermia, undressed some items of clothing, and then at some point succumbed to the elements. I'm not sure that actually explains everything though. The flattened grass with the lighter, seemingly that could point to a person hiding, though of course everything I'm saying now is just speculation. Finally, there is some confusion in regards to the axe incident that night. I've been assuming this whole time that the axe was part of the Halloween prank gone wrong, because it hasn't really received much elaboration at all. The man who did behave inappropriately with the axe was later sent to court and charged for the events of that night. That obviously confuses things, because does that mean that someone was genuinely threatened or hit? Was that purposeful aggression or something that had gone wrong with the prank? Nothing in relation to the axe makes much sense to me. Only that law enforcement believes that it had nothing at all to do with Shaun's disappearance. And clearly they have reason to believe that. Essentially, Shaun's disappearance and the axe incident are treated separately, even though this prank, or whatever it was the incident that made people split up and run. Ultimately, we're left with a puzzling set of circumstances that don't add up however you put it together. Given the extent and length of the search, Shaun should have been found, but he wasn't. So what does this mean? I find myself in agreement with Charlie again, given the said search effort and lack of findings. I suspect he isn't in the area anymore either, though I'm not sure how that's the case. In an earlier article that I came across years ago, Charlie put it best. I just find it bizarre that this group of 8 young lads split up and run, but there's no evidence to say that Shaun disappeared due to criminality. Actually, Danny, the friend from earlier, put this quite well too. It's the first in my life that I've ever experienced anything like this. I've never heard of anything like this, and I find it quite odd that there's been no answers. I mention this every now and then when discussing certain disappearances, but this reminds me a lot of the disappearance of Gaia Pope. Equally confusing and odd. That's basically the extent of all of the information I was able to find on Shaun. If you want to learn more about this disappearance and hear directly from Shaun's family and law enforcement, then I would highly recommend this 40-minute documentary by the journalist Sean O'Neill, which is where I was able to find a lot of information for this video. It's a brilliant documentary and I highly recommend it. It's worth a watch, so I'll leave a link to that in the description below too. Now, moving on, let's explore the disappearance of Gaia Pope. For those that have been here a while, you might recognise Gaia's name, and that's because I've covered her disappearance in the past, but we're going to do something different today and really dive deep and have a thorough look. Gaia's disappearance was actually the case that got me interested in reporting on disappearances in the first place. It received a lot of attention at the time, just a lot of reporting, and is still being reported on to this day. Even those reporting the news look quite confused at times when discussing this case on air, and you'll come to see why. These are all of the facts surrounding Gaia's disappearance that I'm aware of. Now let's zoom into the area in question. Gaia was 19 years old and disappeared on the 7th of November 2017 from the coastal town known as Swanage. The press picked up on Gaia's disappearance the day after it happened, so let's first have a look at the Express. Fears are growing for the safety of a teenage girl who has disappeared from her Dorset home, sparking a major police search. Gaia was last seen at 3:45 PM on Tuesday at an address where she had been staying in Swanage, Dorset. A family member called the police to report her missing when she failed to show up last night, triggering a major search. This major search included the use of helicopters, search dogs, law enforcement, search and rescue personnel, and a lot of volunteers as well. These searches failed to provide any clues as to where she might have gone. On the 9th, we learn that Gaia suffers from severe epilepsy and didn't have any medication with her at the time she went missing. Her sister made this statement, and I've paraphrased this a bit because, as you can imagine, Gaia's sister was understandably emotional and upset. This is completely out of character. Gaia would never have done this, and she has never done this before. She's very much a home bird. This whole thing doesn't make any sense. Another major concern was that because she didn't have her medication on hand, there was every possibility that she could have had a seizure and fallen unconscious somewhere. For anyone who knows someone with epilepsy, you'll know that this can be a pretty big deal. There's a member of my family who suffers from this, but touch wood, I think he has it mostly under control now. Right, so the police released this piece of CCTV footage, which you might be familiar with if you've seen my previous video on this. It's not clear exactly why Gaia was running. I've never seen any claims that Gaia was running away from someone, and the police have never stated that that was the case. For some more details on the search, let's have a look at the Bournemouth Echo. Hundreds of people have searched areas of Swanage, Poole and Bournemouth. Helpers have scoured car parks, cafes and the coastline. A spokesman of the search effort stated this: in total, 15 Coast Guard volunteers conducted a thorough search from Perivale Point and the Downs, up the coast path and Undercliff to Durlston, and from there up to Anvil Point and to Dancing Ledge. This area will become very important later. After more than 6 hours, the teams were stood down by the police and have returned to base. We understand that members of the public are continuing to search this evening, and we urge you to take great care and please stay away from cliff edges and coast paths. These areas have been thoroughly searched today, and nobody wants to see further missing persons or injuries as a result of searching unfamiliar terrain in the dark. As the days went on, the police basically just made it known that they've been having a really hard time understanding where she might have gone. On the 12th of November 2017, there were some celebrities, including Russell Brand, who voiced their support to the family, encouraging others to help if they can. It was nice to see that actually, just people with that kind of audience size using their voice for good. Jonathan Ross also got involved and put out some retweets encouraging people to help out. There was a lot of press coverage on this, and the social media campaign was honestly massive. I was following it quite loosely at the time. It really did seem as though Gaia had just disappeared from the face of the earth, and just no clues at all were presenting themselves. And actually, just to reassure the public, Inspector Andy Edwards stated this: "We are doing everything possible to try and locate Gaia. We are doing everything we possibly can to support the family." Right, now something interesting happened on the 13th of November 2017, 6 days after the initial disappearance. Devon Live posted an article with the following title: "Man, 19 and woman, 71 arrested following disappearance of teen Gaia Pope." Detectives have arrested 2 people following Gaia's disappearance, with searches ongoing to locate her. Search warrants took place at 2 addresses in Swanage late this afternoon. The individuals in question, both from the Swanage area, were arrested and are currently assisting officers with inquiries. They are both known to Gaia. So just to be clear, at that time, the police had suspected that Gaia wasn't even alive anymore, and that these 2 people may have been behind her disappearance. We're not quite there yet, but later we'll discover that the police released them and didn't believe that they had anything to do with it at all. Now let's hear from the senior investigating officer, Neil Devoto. This is what he had to say. "It has almost been a week since Gaia's last confirmed sighting, and she has not been seen or heard from since. We have looked through CCTV that covers the Swanage area, including transport hubs, and there is nothing to suggest that she has left the area. Her disappearance is completely out of character, and following our extensive inquiries, we sadly now believe that she may have come to harm. We have not yet found Gaia, and our searches will continue." Law enforcement didn't actually say why they believe that Gaia may have come in harm's way, but from what I'm reading, I can only imagine that because they hadn't seen her on CCTV and there was no evidence of her leaving, that started to become the primary suspicion. On the 14th, we learned some more information around the 2 individuals that were arrested. This was reported by The Sun. Neighbours say Gaia had recently been staying with her auntie in Swanage, just a few streets away from the 2 individuals who were arrested. In a TV interview before her arrest, the 71-year-old told the BBC how a distressed Gaia banged on her front door asking for help on the day that she disappeared. She said, "She looked upset, very upset. I am just so pleased because I gave her a cuddle and then she responded. Of course I want to find her and I have no idea where she is. She just seems to have disappeared." You'll note that the 71-year-old who was arrested stated that Gaia appeared to be visibly distressed on the day of her disappearance. We actually find out why that may have been the case. The Sun stated this: "The teenager is believed to have been feeling anxious about a man getting released from prison who was jailed for assaulting her 2 years ago. She had been due to attend an appointment with her GP on the afternoon of November 7th, but it is thought that she never made it." Right, it's important to cover this part, and I'm going to do so very carefully. This wasn't just an assault, it was indecent assault, and Gaia didn't just suffer from epilepsy, but this event actually caused her to suffer from PTSD too. I'm going to read a brief statement on this from Gaia's family. After reporting that she had suffered indecent assault at the age of 16, Gaia's life was transformed by PTSD and worsening epilepsy. While Dorset police dropped Gaia's case against Connor Hayes, he was imprisoned for another offence of the same nature on someone else. She lived in fear of his release because he threatened to harm her and her family if she spoke out. In February 2017, soon after she learned Hayes was up for early release, Gaia finally broke down and was hospitalised under the Mental Health Act. The family also stated that the doctor's appointment on the day of disappearance was to ask for mental health support, and she had another appointment that day too to talk to the police about inappropriate harassment online. This information is absolutely vital here because it helps to understand where she was coming from and why she was distressed that day. Obviously, I can't say for certain or anything like that, but she very well could have been suffering from a really bad episode that day because of her PTSD. Right. The two arrested individuals were released on the 14th. A police spokeswoman stated that both individuals have now been released under investigation. You can only imagine that they just hadn't found anything to indicate that they had something to do with Gaia's disappearance. Moving on to the 15th now, Gaia's family released a statement and they state that they believed that she was still alive and they just urged people to keep looking. The family made the point that she may be being kept somewhere. Now, as far as I can tell, there was no physical evidence of this at all. But when someone disappears in this manner and you can't find a single clue or trace, you have to suspect this. And I fully support the family's efforts to keep this in the spotlight. Right, the 71-year-old woman who was arrested was one of the last people to see Gaia, and this is what The Guardian had reported. On Wednesday, the 71-year-old's ex-husband dismissed the notion that she or the 19-year-old could be involved in the disappearance. He said of her last encounter with Gaia, she was at home on her own. She gets a bang on the door at 3 PM. She goes downstairs and Gaia is there, crying her eyes out. Less than an hour before her last confirmed sighting at 3:39 PM on the 7th, she was being driven by a family member when they stopped off for fuel. Gaia went into the garage to buy an ice cream at about 2:55 PM. You might notice that I'm not referring to those that were arrested by name, and I'm mostly doing that because as far as I can tell, the authorities never found any evidence to suggest that they'd done anything. It's too late now, mind you, because it was all over the news, but this is something that they might be associated with forever now, and the 19-year-old was an aspiring actor. It's difficult to really know how to handle that, but I didn't want to further propagate the idea of their involvement if the police have cleared them. On the 16th, we actually learned some more details about this interaction with the 71-year-old. This was reported by The Sun. Gaia disappeared after turning up at the home of her friend's grandmother in a distressed and agitated state. Gaia then started to remove items of clothing in front of the 71-year-old, telling her, "I'm too hot." The ex-husband, retelling the event, said Gaia went in and stripped off the top half of her clothes down to her bra. She was really concerned and managed to persuade Gaia to put the clothes back on, but Gaia left without her coat. Gaia said she needed to go and find one of her old school friends. Now, the neighbours stated that they heard the pair having an altercation on the day she went missing, but unfortunately this was never expanded upon. However, because Gaia was pounding on the door initially, I can see why that would be taken as an altercation without any further information or context. It was also stated that when the door was answered, Gaia slid down the door and sat for a moment. The friend's mother did say it didn't appear to be anything to do with epilepsy. but more to do with her current state. From what I can understand here, the same day that they were arrested, forensic teams and sniffer dogs entered the home. The fact that they were then released probably indicates that nothing at all was found to suggest that they'd done anything here. Though they were released under investigation, so it's an avenue that the police weren't ready to give up on yet. Just for clarity, I wanted to add this point about Gaia's interaction with the person in question. This was stated by the ex-husband and reported by the Express. She had taken Gaia in when she called at her home, upset and crying, only to see her run away without her coat. Gaia ran out the front door with no coat on a freezing night and disappeared into fresh air. If she had an epileptic fit on a night like that, she wouldn't have survived. There are only two possible scenarios. Either she went voluntarily with somebody, or somebody pulled her into a car. I also wanted to make it clear, because I haven't mentioned this yet, the two people that were arrested didn't live together. The 71-year-old grandmother lived with her son, who was 49. And the 19-year-old grandson lived separately with his own mother. It was either down the same street or at least very close. Gaia and the 19-year-old were good friends, and from what I understand, Gaia was close to that family, or at least knew them and got on with them well. Now let's have a look at The Guardian, because an important discovery was made on the 16th. Hopes were fading for Gaia Pope after a woman's clothes were found in a field close to the seaside town where she vanished 9 days ago, and a third person was arrested. Detectives had not established who the clothes belonged to, but said they were similar to some of those Gaia was wearing when she disappeared. The arrested man was the son of the grandmother and uncle of the 19-year-old earlier arrested. The ex-husband then stated that his son was 110% innocent. The clothes were found at 10:28 AM by a member of the public in an area of open land north of the coastal path. The field where the clothes were found is just inland from a beauty spot called Dancing Ledge on the Jurassic Coast. It is southwest of Swanage Town Centre and around 1.5 miles due south of Langton, Matravers. Just important to note here is that while at the time they hadn't confirmed that the clothes belonged to Gaia, we know that they were in fact Gaia's clothes. Now let's have a look at the BBC, who included a statement from Neil Devoto. Here's what was said. Following the discovery of these items of clothing, a full and thorough search will now take place in the field and surrounding area. We have seized the clothing and investigations will now be carried out to identify who they belong to. The Times also highlighted a couple of key points, and I quote, "Police have searched the ex-husband's home and seized his car. He said that he had shown officers his bank card in an effort to prove that he had been working in the Weymouth area when she disappeared." And in regards to the 19-year-old, her cousin Mariana said he and Gaia were friends. They went to school together. I can't believe he has any reason to hurt her. It seems as though the ex-husband was never arrested or anything like that, so I can only assume that law enforcement were able to confirm that he wasn't in the area on the day in question. Now, the 49-year-old, the Jersey Evening Post, had this to say. The third person to be arrested, a 49-year-old man, has been released under investigation by Dorset police. So once more, while they suspected this particular family for reasons that haven't been explicitly stated, it appears that they couldn't find any evidence to make it stick. I'm not sure if it was because the grandmother was one of the last people to see Gaia, and obviously she had took her coat off at the home. Whatever the case may be though, it really does seem like there was a lot of confusion present, and it looks like no one was really sure what was happening. Even when they discovered the clothes on the coastal path, just the way it reads from these various sources, that seemed to blindside everyone too. I found another interesting piece of information in regards to the arrested and released 49-year-old. The ex-husband said, "They haven't had any luck with the grandmother nor the grandson. Now they want him. When they first spoke to him, he said, 'Here's my phone, here's my bank card. Do you want to search my car?' He has nothing to hide." Just another note on the clothes actually, because I want to be specific. It looks to have been all of her clothing items that they'd found, including her shoes. I quote, "Forensic officers at the search site could later be seen retrieving a white trainer which was similar to those Gaia was wearing when she disappeared." It's important we highlight something now because we're at an important juncture in Gaia's disappearance. As has been stated, the point at which they found the clothing was now the main focus point of the search. In that very location, they had helicopters with thermal imaging technology flying overhead. They had professional search dog teams on the ground, as well as the many ground searchers, and they were all over this area. This was no small search by any means and has been described repeatedly as a mass search. Now let's move forward 2 days onto the 18th. This is a very important date because this is when Gaia's body was found and things are about to get bizarre. Let's have a look at the Independent. Police searching for Gaia Pope have found a body near Swanage, which detectives said they are confident is the missing teenager. Dorset police said the discovery was made by specialist search teams near a coastal path and field where the items of the 19-year-old's clothing were found this week. Detective Superintendent Paul Kessel said that the circumstances of her passing remain unexplained. Right, on to the 19th. We actually get a couple of interesting statements as well as some very unusual information. Let's have a look at the Daily Mail. Earlier this week, Gaia's family criticised Dorset police, saying they were being kept in the dark by the force. They said they were not told of the arrest of the 3 individuals in connection with Gaia, and had only heard of them through social media. A family friend told The Times, "We don't understand what the police are doing. They say someone has been arrested on suspicion of bringing harm to Gaia, and then in the next sentence, they say that they are hopeful Gaia will be found alive and well. We also know from what people have told us that they have been knocking on doors asking people if they have seen a couple, a man with heavy tattoos and a woman with lots of jewellery acting suspiciously." I did say earlier that everyone seems so confused in this disappearance, and you can see why, because all of the information doesn't gel very well together and it isn't making sense. Just to reiterate that point, let's get bizarre. On Thursday, police discovered items of clothing strewn in a field 200 yards from a 70-foot cliff top. Last night, police said that Gaia's family confirmed they match clothes worn by Gaia. There were fears the clothes may have been dumped there at some point over the last few days. The area was searched multiple times by police, coast guards and volunteers in the days after Gaia disappeared, but on each occasion nothing was found. Police and coast guards first searched the cliff top between Anvil Point and Dancing Ledge near Swanage the day after Gaia went missing. And according to a spreadsheet of search locations on the Find Gaia Facebook page, the area of Priest's Way next to the field where the clothing was found was scoured by volunteers on November 9. So, the place where Gaia's clothing was found had already been searched multiple times, and then 2 days afterwards, Gaia's body appears a short distance away near a coastal path. It's hard to imagine that a body was missed so close to the clothing, so not only were Gaia's clothes placed there, but her body seems to have been potentially placed there after the fact as well. The question is, how exactly was she placed there? It seems to me there are a couple of possibilities here. Firstly, as has been stated, this was a cold time and Gaia had left her coat at the home of the arrested woman. It could be that Gaia left the town and headed up into this remote area and had then suffered from hypothermia at some stage, and then followed by paradoxical undressing, and then she fell there. However, I found that hard to believe because it becomes very difficult to explain away how she managed to evade the searchers for all of that time, especially once they'd discovered the clothing. There were helicopters overhead with thermal imaging equipment. If there's something on the ground producing heat, you're not going to miss it. In addition to that, how in the world did the dogs miss her scent in this scenario? It's very odd. The second hypothesis here has got to be third-party involvement. Now, to be clear, I'm not sure what this may have looked like either. There was no evidence of a vehicle being near the location she was found, and you'd expect to see that. Could someone have carried her there? That would also have been difficult, especially with thousands of people in the area. How did she get there without being discovered? This is something I've always struggled with in this disappearance. Now, let's get bizarre again. Why not? This was reported by The Guardian still on the 19th of November 2017. The teenager, Gaia Pope, whose body was found 11 days after she went missing from a seaside town, had not suffered any injuries that would suggest foul play, detectives have said. A post-mortem has taken place, but the cause of passing may not be known for some time as toxicology and other tests are being carried out. Specifically, Paul Kessel stated this: "The post-mortem examination has not identified any injuries to suggest any other person was involved in her passing." So what we can glean here is that Gaia passed away without any real injuries to speak of. So what happened? I said a minute ago that the second hypothesis may have been as a result of third-party involvement, but there was absolutely no evidence of that. The first hypothesis I'd mentioned about evading the searchers also seems equally unlikely too, just for different reasons. I also just wanted to clarify that on the 20th of November 2017, law enforcement clarified that the 3 earlier arrested would face no further action, and they themselves thought about bringing forward their own lawsuits against the police. Things like this quickly get out of hand, and that's why I've refused to name them throughout this, because mud sticks. And as said, it's already too late, but their names will always be associated with this now in some way. Anyway, here's another piece of interesting information that was reported by the Daily Mail. Gaia's clothes and body were eventually found in a location thought to be one of her known haunts, one said to have been repeatedly searched. Her cousin, Mariana, stated, "It should not have taken 11 days to find her so close, and we need to know why." She's referring to the body being so close to the clothing, and honestly, she raised a very good question. There has never been a great explanation given as to why it took so long to find her, especially in this area that had been searched many times over. I did find a statement from the authorities and reported by the Daily Mail. The police defended its searches, saying it had deployed significant resources which were intelligence-led and directed by specially trained police search advisors. The area where Gaia was found was deep within very thick gorse and undergrowth, close to a cliff edge. This would have made it incredibly difficult for even the helicopter to see her using high-tech thermal imaging. It also required the expertise of specialist recovery officers to reach her. Okay, so if it required that kind of expertise, then how did she get there in the first place? Once hypothermia sets in, a person becomes very groggy, slow-moving, confused, and yet this place apparently required specialists to get to. Do you think that was ever questioned? Nope. Maybe she fell? Would you have expected injuries in that case? I'm not sure. Now we need to move to February of 2018 because there were no real updates to speak of until that time. Right, so let's have a look at The Guardian, where we find out more information from the inquest. Gaia Pope, the Dorset teenager whose disappearance sparked a high-profile police inquiry, passed away as a result of hypothermia, an inquest has heard. The coroner's officer, Andrew Lord, said a pathologist, Dr. Russell Delaney, was initially unable to establish a cause of passing, but later determined that she had passed away as a result of hypothermia. The family, however, still wanted answers and were demanding to know why it took 11 days to find her. You can see why they weren't happy here. Her clothes being found in an area searched many times, and then Guy's body was found 2 days later not far away. Yeah, I think most of us would have questions about that. Mariana seemed to have some particularly tough questions that she wanted answers to. Here's what she said on the 6th of May 2018. The police talked a good game. They told us they had dogs out and helicopters up with thermal imaging equipment so sensitive it could pick up a signal from a body even up to 48 hours after passing. One of the officers said to me, if she was out there, we'd have found her. When she was eventually found, I could not believe it. Every relative and close friend of Gaia who asked where she might go would have put Priest's Way at number 1 on the list. If there were helicopters flying overhead, how did they not see her, on foot even? If they stuck to the path, they would have seen her, if they were looking. I think Mariana raised some excellent points there, to be honest, and while the family may have had the view that the police just did a terrible job, I think it's well worth considering the idea that she wasn't actually there at the time of searching. I must admit, I find it very difficult to believe that they could have simply missed her there with the dogs out and the helicopters up. The dogs aren't relying on their sight here like we are. They can follow a scent, and any search dog handler will tell you that if the scent was there, the dogs would have found her. Only they didn't, and that never happened. It's very odd, and something just doesn't quite sit right in this disappearance. A full year on from the disappearance now, on the 7th of November 2018, the family stated that they still know very little more than Gaia had passed away as a result of hypothermia. The police investigation was also being investigated by watchdogs, but honestly, it has always felt like confusion has surrounded Gaia's disappearance since it happened. That really is the best way of putting it. No one really knows what happened here. As said a few times now, even the discovery of the clothes and of her body is odd and hard to make sense of. The police made a lot of mistakes initially investigating that family that we've spoken about, presumably because nothing else was making sense here. Just some other notes. Connor Hayes, the person who Gaia accused of indecent assault, was actually jailed again for the exact same crime in December of 2018, against someone else obviously. Honestly, if someone keeps re-offending in the exact same way every time, actually let's not go there. On the 18th of October 2019, the family were again frustrated because the investigation over the police investigation was repeatedly breaking its own deadlines with little explanation. I actually found a statement made by the family. Every deadline we have been given has been broken with little explanation, while decisions are made without us behind closed doors. Even the monthly updates we were promised, we have had to chase for. Now, less than 4 weeks before it was due to resume, we are told that the inquest will be postponed yet again. We have always maintained that what happened to Gaia is a matter not just of our private grief, but one of public concern. I fully agree with that statement. On the 16th of September 2020, the family stated this at a pre-inquest hearing. Vital questions about Gaia's passing and the adequacy of local support services remain unanswered. We know that there are significant gaps in the evidence. The one thing we want more than for this to be over is for this to be effective and prevent future harm. The last update that I could find was from the end of January 2021, and the inquest seems to have been pushed back because of the current events that we're all dealing with at the minute. So, the family haven't given up, which is good, and I hope that they get the answers that they deserve. With that, let's move on to the final disappearance. Nora was 15 years old when she disappeared, and at the time she was with her family on holiday near the capital, Kuala Lumpur. There, the family was staying at the Dusun Holiday Resort right on the edge of a rainforest. This was reported by The Independent on the 4th of August 2019. A girl from London with learning difficulties has gone missing in Malaysia, a family friend has said. Police with sniffer dogs have launched a search for Nora. Her parents discovered she was not in her hotel room at about 6:30 in the morning on Sunday, and that the window was open, according to a friend. The friend added that Nora's parents were frantic, which you can obviously imagine here, and she also said that it's completely out of character for Nora to just go wandering off. In my opinion, Nora's disappearance was very odd, and right off the bat, as you're probably expecting, the search dogs could not locate Nora's scent during this search. Well, there's actually more on that later. So from what we understand so far, the working theory was that Nora had exited through the window and had entered the rainforest. However, a lot of people don't believe that she would ever do that because she was practically attached at the hip to her parents, and we'll get into all of this. The Irish Times then reported that because Nora's mother is Irish and her father is French, their respective governments had reached out and just helped to support. That did actually translate into search efforts too, and it did certainly mean that diplomats in the country were helping out with guidance. Still, as per the 4th of August 2019, the Daily Mail offered some more information in regards to the thought process as to what may have happened. They stated that the authorities had estimated that she'd gone missing sometime around midnight. It's not clear exactly why they thought that, but that was the suspicion. The Daily Mail stated this: "It is not yet clear if Nora left her hotel room of her own accord or whether she was taken." That statement is the dividing line of the two camps, and we'll explore this as we move forwards. Right, so on to the 5th of August 2019. The Guardian published an article titled "Nora Quoirin, Malaysian Police Deny Case is Being Treated as Possible Foul Play." However, the Guardian also stated this: "After Malaysian police insisted that it was not being treated as foul play, the charity said, contrary to several reports that the police are not treating Nora's disappearance as though it could be a result of foul play, the family have been told directly by the police that they are treating it as both potential foul play and as a missing persons case." Interestingly, the article from The Independent stated that they realised Nora was missing at 6:30 AM. However, The Guardian reported, "Nora's father raised the alarm when he discovered her missing from her bedroom at 8 AM on Sunday. Her window had been opened. Police said they have dispatched more than 100 officers and sniffer dogs in the resort and surrounding areas." Both statements here can't be true, so I'm not sure what's happened here other than someone's got it wrong. But because this is the later article, it's probably the best bet to assume that the Guardian's report is more accurate. Matthew Sale, who is the chief executive at LBT Global, which is an overseas crisis support group, stated this: "This is a very vulnerable young girl missing in a remote location. She has been missing for over 24 hours now, and it is imperative that every resource available is deployed to search for her." And finally, just as per this article, I want to bring you the feelings and the thoughts of the family. Nora's aunt stated this: Nora is a child with special needs and has learning and developmental disabilities which make her especially vulnerable, and we fear for her safety. Nora would not know how to get help and would never leave her family voluntarily. We now consider this a criminal matter. We are appealing to everyone to assist the local police in any way that they can. So as per this point, we can see that the authorities' official position seems to be that this was accidental. Their private position to the family seems to be that they're looking in both directions, that it could be foul play or she could have just wandered off. The family's position at this stage seems to be that it was almost certainly foul play. That's pretty odd honestly, but I think more so indicates that law enforcement had no real idea as to what had happened here. My personal position is that I'm with the family here, in that I've worked with many children who have special educational needs, and I do believe that she wouldn't have just gone out into the pitch black jungle alone. Right, so let's now have a look at the Daily Mail. Just to solidify what was just said, here's what was reported. The family of Nora Quoirin insists that she was most likely taken from her hotel room in Malaysia and have slammed the police for claiming otherwise. Her parents have described the police's claims that there was no foul play as very strange. We actually get some more information in regards to the exact point of disappearance. This is what Matthew Sell had to say. Nora's family are extremely concerned and believe at this stage the most likely scenario is that she was taken. The room was accessible to members of the public and there is no security due to the nature of the resort. The accommodation leads straight out into the open jungle, so there is a lot of concern about where she could have been taken or where she is now. Because this was making headline news and many people were talking about it, and obviously because they wanted to find her, over 200 police officers had been assigned to the search, and remember, we're still on the 5th of August 2019 here, so that was fairly fast. At this point in the research, I was actually feeling pretty damn frustrated because, as reported by The Sun, Nora's distraught parents woke at 7 AM on Sunday to find her room empty and a window popped open. Good actual lord, is it 6:30, 8 or 7 in the morning when this discovery was made? Very frustrating actually, because these details are important and it's not clear to me why all of these articles are contradicting each other. You think that this might be settled? The BBC have stated 8 AM, so let's just go with that. Right, Matthew Sell made another statement. Here's what he said. Nora would not have been able to open the window on her own and it was found propped open. They also know that Nora would not have walked off anywhere on her own. There was no sign of a struggle in the room, but we still believe that she was taken. It seems to me that as of right now, there are 3 possibilities here. One is that Nora simply left on her own accord, though if it wouldn't have been possible for her to open the window, then that's difficult. The second is that, as the parents suspected, there was third-party involvement here. The final suggestion here, and obviously I can't say whether this is the case or not, but is there any possibility at all that she might have seen something through the window that caught her attention and maybe drew her in? Perhaps an animal or someone with not so good intentions? Obviously it's very doubtful that an animal could have helped her open the window, mind you, but could someone have helped her from the outside? It's not clear, but that is something that crossed my mind when first hearing of Nora over a year ago now, but it's just speculation and nothing more. The BBC gave some information in regards to the specific resort Nora disappeared from. Here's what was said. According to its website, the Sun is a 12-acre orchard resort in the foothills of the Titiwangsa Mountains and sits next to the 4,000-acre Berumbum Forest Reserve. It has a maximum capacity of 20 adults split across 7 houses. The resort's nearest neighbours are 2 Temuan villages where most of its staff are from. Probably butchered a lot of names there, and I apologise if that's the case. But we're moving on to the 6th of August now, and what you're about to hear really set off all the alarm bells for me, because this is just odd. The Daily Mail published an article titled "Police Dogs Lose Trail of Missing Nora Quoirin, just yards from Jungle Eco Resort in Malaysia, where she vanished." Let's have a further look. The family of a girl who disappeared on holiday in a Malaysian jungle resort believe police are missing vital clues by ignoring fears that she was taken. Relatives lashed out after it emerged that sniffer dogs lost the scent of Nora Quoirin just 100 yards from the Eco Lodge bungalow where she vanished. Authorities in Malaysia are adamant that the British 15-year-old who has learning difficulties knowingly ventured out of the rented property that borders thick jungle and got lost. The search has so far seen hundreds of soldiers, police and firefighters along with sniffer dogs and a helicopter scour the jungle. 180 individuals continued to comb a 20-acre area of dense forest last night. Police Chief Mohammed Mat Yusuf said, "We will do our best and will not give up hope. We feel she did not go far. We have nothing that suggests third-party involvement in her disappearance. We don't have an ounce of evidence to suggest that." The police chief said sniffer dogs were used to investigate the scene only hours after Nora's disappearance. He added, "They only picked up a scent some 100 metres from the resort. They lost the trail after that." Okay, there's a lot of rich information to take in here, but I will say that from my understanding, the dogs picking up a scent like that only to disappear is atypical if she was still in the area. Now, to be fair, when you look at research journals of the effectiveness of search dogs, you'll find that they normally indicate that the dogs are very effective, but that further studies are required in terms of being location specific. So it could be possible that the effectiveness increases or decreases depending on the environment. It is worth pointing out that search dogs have been used for at least 600 years in all manners of locations, so to be fair, that probably speaks for itself. So what could have happened here? The search dogs are able to follow the scent for around 100 metres, which is around 110 yards, and at that point they completely lose the scent. The way this has been reported, and especially because the jungle was where the search was being conducted, the search dogs likely led them towards the jungle. That means that it's unlikely there was a vehicle there since the window opens up to the jungle. So why was her scent lost? Where did she go exactly? As she ventured into the jungle, did her scent just gradually disappear? It's an odd factor and I'm not really sure. Typically, you'll hear from dog search leaders that if the scent is there, the dogs will find them. Here are some other interesting comments from Matthew Searle and others. Matthew said, "Nora never goes anywhere by herself. We have no reason to believe she wandered off and is lost." The resort then said, "The Eco Hotel admitted the window in Nora's bedroom may have been opened from the outside, contradicting earlier police statements." The trust working with the family then said this, "It's unlikely that Nora could have opened the window on her own. She is understood to have been sharing the bedroom with her younger siblings." From what we know too, it doesn't appear that the younger siblings heard or saw anything. Moving on to the 7th of August 2019, we actually start to hear some of the very odd and suspicious information. On this day, the Malaysian police for the first time publicly admitted that there was a possibility that Nora had been taken. Previously, they'd said that there wasn't any evidence. However, on the 7th, they confirmed that they had discovered unidentified fingerprints at the jungle cottage where Nora disappeared. The police chief then refused to give any further information. However, he did say this, and this was reported by the Daily Mail. Police Chief Zakaria also clarified that it was the window in the living hall downstairs that was left open, and not the one in the bedroom upstairs where the girl was. He then declined to say if the window could be opened from the outside, saying the investigation was ongoing. That's particularly fascinating because so far it feels like we've been led to believe that the window in question was inside the bedroom, but now we're learning that the window of concern was downstairs in the living hall. So what's the theory in that case then? That Nora had gone downstairs for a drink or something like that and then left through the window? Or are we saying that someone else came inside the cottage? That's just very strange. Interestingly, The Guardian reported that members of the Senoi Prak, I've probably butchered that, but they're a special police team comprised of indigenous tribes who are famed for their forest tracking skills, and they combed through the dense forestry. Their search too ended in failure though, and it doesn't appear that they were able to find any footprints or anything of that nature. We have some amount of confusion again because on the 8th of August 2019, the BBC reported that her bedroom window was open, but we've literally just heard the Daily Mail report that the police chief said it wasn't the bedroom window, but it was the downstairs living hall window. I don't really know what to tell you about these contradictions, other than these are some basic facts you'd think we'd come to an understanding of. Right, just putting that aside, on the 9th we hear that footprints have been discovered in the jungle. This is what The Independent had to say. Footprints thought to belong to missing British teenager Nora Quoirin have been discovered in the Malaysian jungle. Authorities are operating on the theory that she is lost in the jungle and have deployed hundreds of officers, drones and helicopters within a 6-kilometre radius of the hotel. The footprints were found by the Fire and Rescue Department sniffer dogs on Thursday, according to the division's assistant director, Ahmed Mokhtar. What's interesting here is that it appears as though the footprints indicated that Nora was alone, in that I can't find mention of it looking as though there was more than one person present. This was obviously their focus point now, but further searches of the surrounding area didn't yield any results. They didn't find any further clues, but the teams were optimistic. On the 10th of August 2019, we learned that the authorities began to scale the search down from a 12-kilometre radius to just 4. You've got to imagine that because they weren't able to find anything at all after the discovery of the footprints, they just couldn't believe that she'd gone that far. The Deputy Commissioner said that they just don't have any leads at all, but they are continuing the search, and that there was just no evidence at all to point in the direction of foul play. Right, we're moving on to the 12th now, and things are about to get weird. So weird actually that I've rewritten this about 5 times, so let's get bizarre. I'm just going to read you the headline, and there's many just like this one, but this one is from The Sun. Missing Nora Quoirin was taken by a genie, claims Malaysian shaman brought in by cops to crack the case. So firstly, what's interesting to me right off the bat here is that the police themselves brought the shamans in, which seems to indicate that there are these kinds of beliefs present among the force too. Here's what was reported. Malaysian shamans who have joined cops from Ireland, France and the UK to search for missing Brit Nora Quoirin claim she was lured away by a genie. As the desperate search for Nora enters its second week, the medicine men have been seen crying and praying in the dense jungle for her safe return. Wearing skull caps while performing ancient rituals, the shamans sat cross-legged on the jungle floor and covered their eyes. Right, one of the shamans, called Khalid Mohammed, said that a genie is an invisible spirit that inhabits the earth and is able to influence people by appearing in the form of humans or animals. As someone who doesn't know all that much about this kind of thing, the only thing I can really add is that I find it absolutely bizarre that you can find these kinds of accounts throughout the whole world who speak of these kinds of entities almost verbatim. Anyway, back to Khalid. He said that the genie was drawn to Nora because she has special needs and had chosen Nora as its stepdaughter, which is probably the creepiest thing we'll all hear today, I'm sure. He said, "Tonight, I will ask for the spirit to return her from where she was taken and the condition they took her. But they will ask for something in exchange. That will be between me and them. Most important now, the child will be released. She is here now, so we will stay here tonight to see if we can find her, and then we can know why she went missing." Can you even imagine if there genuinely is more to these kinds of beliefs and superstitions than we actually realise or are willing to believe? I said earlier that perhaps she was drawn to something outside. Just how creepy would it be if it was something like this pretending to be an animal or a familiar person? The thought of that is just awful and sick. What I do find interesting though is that these shamans were brought in by the police, so they clearly take these beliefs and rituals very seriously. Right. Now we're moving on to the 13th of August 2019, because this is when the discovery of Nora's body was made, 10 days after the initial disappearance. It was a local team of hikers who found her around 1.6 miles away from the resort. Let's just have a look at The Guardian for more details. The body was uncovered near a stream at around 2 PM by members of the Seremban Hikers Club who had joined police. The area in the Batemba Mountains where the discovery was made, and which was described by the police chief as not an accessible area, had been scoured by rescue teams days earlier. How can the area simultaneously be an inaccessible place, and yet there she was? It's also interesting to note that they had searched that very area before. The Daily Mail offers some more details, and it's important to state that she was found completely clothesless, including missing footwear, though she was barefoot initially when she left. We've heard Nora's body was found near a stream, and the Daily Mail states that there was a waterfall nearby too, and the Telegraph said that this was in a ravine. Just interestingly, and perhaps a coincidence, she had told her family that she was excited to visit a waterfall when they first arrived. When they first found Nora, the police chief was asked directly to comment on the state of the body, presumably because a lot of people were feeling that this could have been as a result of foul play. Well, the police chief refused to comment on the condition right away. The day afterwards, on the 14th, we get to hear some brief comments from those who carried out the autopsy. They basically stated that they weren't able to determine the cause of passing, and the deputy police chief said that there's nothing they can say yet until they know more. Okay, now we're gonna have to get weird again. This question was posed by the Daily Mail. Was Nora moved? Volunteer who found Nora's body believes she could not have been there when search teams first checked the area because she was lying in plain sight with her head on her hands. Let's hear a bit more about that. A volunteer who found the missing teen's body said today that he believes she could not have been in the spot for very long because previous searches of the area would have found her. He theorised that she had been lost in the jungle and had walked to a waterfall close to where she was found in order to get a drink and had collapsed. That's really strange. The whole thing is strange actually, just the fact that she went out in the first place. I can't even imagine how this must have felt for her loved ones. But I do know that they wanted answers. Still on the 14th, Nora's parents questioned as to whether she could have been placed there after the fact, and you can absolutely see why they would have posed that question. It's so hard to believe that she was there for the entire time. The indigenous people know this type of terrain better than most of us can ever even appreciate, and when they said that she's highly unlikely to have been near there when they first searched the area, I believe them. You'd imagine that if she was close by, the searchers or the dogs might have found her, but that didn't happen. So just to be specific, the questioning coming from the family and posed by Matthew Searle was this. We have a large amount of questions. One of those questions is, has the body been there all the time, or is there a third party involvement? Was the body dumped there afterwards? Right, let's move on to the 15th, and I want to be very careful about how I express this next part. Those performing the autopsy stated that they believed that Nora had passed away as a result of hunger and stress. They said that it appears as though a stomach ulcer had burst and that this was the cause. They also said that there was no sign that she was taken, nor was there any sign that she'd been assaulted or indecently assaulted. According to The Sun, they also stated that she'd been alive for a week before passing away. I found that statement odd, actually. Perhaps there are specifics that aren't being made clear, but Nora's body was found on the 13th, so 9 days after she went missing. The exact location her body was discovered had been searched days prior, so if they're confident that she was alive for 1 week before passing away, doesn't that leave 2 days unaccounted for when she wasn't in the area that she was later found? It's not like they could have missed her, because a volunteer who took part in the search stated that she wasn't covered in any foliage at all. It's just so odd that it's quite hard to really wrap your head around that. I suppose the working theory is that she wandered on over to the final position after the searchers cleared the area, but then they shouldn't have stated that she was alive for 7 days. Unless of course the press just got that wrong, though you'd like to think that they get these things right. In practice though, I'm not so sure a lot of the time anymore. The family, as you might imagine, were not completely convinced by the results of the post-mortem, and this statement was made. We don't want the media to interpret the first results of the autopsy and exclude the criminal hypothesis. It's too early to say that. The family still finds it difficult to understand that she would have gone into the jungle on her own. They are concerned that she did not leave on her own. Even the place where she was found, over a mile away from the resort, it's very strange that she could go there by herself, so we cannot exclude the criminal hypothesis. The Mirror also reported that she had passed away 2 to 4 days before being found. That's very surprising actually, because her body was found in an area already searched just a few days before being found. That is very odd, and I can completely see why the family were asking these questions. In fact, I've got to be honest, based on what I'm reading, I'm finding it difficult to believe as well. Nora's grandfather put this very succinctly, and I found myself in complete agreement of the notion. She wasn't there yet during any of the previous searches. Someone put her there to get rid of her. Can you imagine her walking 2.5 kilometers clothesless and barefoot over rocks in the middle of the night? That's absurd. I would add as well that the area was officially described as being inaccessible, so it's even more strange than that. The parents were completely bewildered by this, and you can probably imagine that. The circumstances in this disappearance are honestly just wild. and I'll tell you why. The only working theory that makes sense here is that Nora got up and left the resort on her own because there is absolutely no forensic evidence to suggest otherwise. And despite that being Occam's razor, it doesn't make any damn sense either, given everything that we've discussed so far. The range of days in which she passed away and then being found, despite a previous search taking place in the area she was discovered in that kind of range, is weird. And on the other hand, you might say, well, hey, it must be that someone came in and took her unwillingly. Well, what is the evidence of that? If there's no evidence of injury, assault, indecent assault, or anything of that nature, what happened? It's also hard to believe that someone had taken her away from the site, because then you need to explain how she was placed back there and why the dogs led to the jungle. Of course, it is possible, but it's made very risky and dangerous because there's so many people out looking for her, including a lot of law enforcement officers. Okay, hang on. Let me be absolutely specific. There was some bruises on her legs and minor cuts on her feet, but they looked to be explainable by suggesting that she'd been walking clothesless in this harsh area. Although, just to clarify, you'd expect far more than just cuts in that kind of terrain. And just to clarify as well, the authorities did say that the bruises on the legs and the cuts would not have caused someone to pass away. It's very difficult to understand what happened here, and it makes me so frustrated when this happens to young people. I mean with everyone really, but you know what I mean, just complete innocence and then something bizarre like this happens. We're not done yet, there's more. I want you to hear this quote. Nora could not have reached the steep ravine where her body was found by herself, a search team member in Malaysia has claimed. The volunteer, an expert in the area, said it would have been impossible for the barefoot 15-year-old to walk across the forest on her own. I'm not sure if I've mentioned this yet, but Nora's disabilities covered both physical and mental. It's just important that we bear that in mind. Let's continue. Nora couldn't have gotten there by herself. I struggle to walk. The path is difficult for even an able-bodied person. Dense vegetation snags your feet. The roots and rocks are wet. My boots were destroyed by the end, and Nora was barefoot. The gradient of the slope range was 20 to 40%. Nora would have had to cross 2 streams. When you have people who have lived in these areas for their entire life, I think it's important that we listen to them. Malaysian law enforcement tried to backtrack, saying that inexperienced cops might have missed her. That's hard to believe, given that where she was found, it was in an area where there was no foliage covering her at all. Can you even believe this kind of situation? You've come from a place where you're not even remotely familiar with this kind of culture or belief system, and then the cops take you, the family, to mediums, or shamans I guess, to plead with spirits to return your daughter. Well, that's what happened. I quote, Nora's distraught parents were said to have been invited to the 2-hour audience the day before Nora was found, but they left just after an hour. A source stated police were under pressure and really struggling with the case. They wanted to do anything and everything they could to find a breakthrough. And during the ceremony, which took place on Pantai Hill, the mediums asked spirits to return Nora to her family, which many locals believe was behind her being found. You can see why the locals believe that something completely beyond the ordinary had happened here. They're looking at this and thinking, look at how harsh the terrain is. Nora had a disability which affected her physically. Look at how far she got. Oh, she wasn't injured at all, apart from the bruises on her legs and the cuts on her feet. Where are the clothes? Oh, there's no evidence of anything nefarious happening. She was found in an area that was extensively searched. You know, what was the motive here for someone to have taken her? She wasn't injured and nothing of that nature had happened here. Nora's disappearance is very unsettling and honestly borderline unbelievable. Here's a change of pace, but this needs to be reported even though it makes me feel a bit uncomfortable. There was an Irish lawyer called Anne Brennan who tried to claim that the family were involved in this somehow. Here's what she said. The family did everything in their power to subvert the course of justice. They somehow convinced the Malaysian authorities to abandon their inquiry and release Nora's body without producing the necessary forensic and toxicology reports. That form the part of every standard criminal investigation. All the simple routine things that happen in a missing child case and criminal investigation failed to happen in the case of Nora. There was no evidence of a struggle, no fingerprints, footprints or screams. Nobody heard anything. Malaysian police said that Nora did not go alone. A third party was involved, and the third party was someone known to Nora. Well, what can you really say about that? It's very difficult to comment on that, only I go by official reports from law enforcement and I can't see them suspecting or accusing the family. Though when you have a complete and total lack of evidence and an unbelievable set of circumstances that you have here, everything must become suspect. I'd pose this argument, and I'd like to hear from someone that knows more about these kinds of areas than I do. If the family had done this, where were the footprints? Why weren't there any other footprints leading to the body? If it's next to a stream, in theory you'd expect some muddiness. I just can't board that train. I'm not saying it's impossible or anything like that, but I'm just not there. Am I wrong? Could that have been the case? You let me know your thoughts. At this point, I want to quote Shaun Ritchie, the searcher who discovered Nora. Here's what was said. It looked like she was sleeping. Her head was resting on her hands, but we all knew she wasn't with us. It was very sad, and two women in the group did not want to come close and they started crying. I could see the body. She was lying with her hands behind her head like you do when you go to sleep. There were some scratches on her arm and some bruises, but otherwise there were no injuries. I am not sure, but I think she had passed away a few days ago. The place where she was found is not easy to find. I wonder if she had been following the stream, as there were no footprints, which means she could have been walking in the water as it was not very deep. It's just bizarre, so there were absolutely no footprints at all to speak of. Just based on what we know of Nora, I can't imagine that she would know to follow the stream. Just what happened here? Right, moving forwards now to the 17th of December 2019, Nora's family seem to be absolutely convinced that not all is how it seems in this instance, and who can blame them? Nora's parents stated, and this was reported by the BBC, it would have been impossible, physically and mentally, to imagine that Nora could have got any distance at all. She never even walked as far as our neighbour's front door by herself. For us, something very complex happened. We have insisted from the beginning that we believe there was a criminal element to what happened. To think that Nora might get up in the middle of the night, clothesless and barefoot, then get out of the bungalow into the jungle, bearing in mind the terrain is extremely steep and dangerous in total darkness, makes absolutely no sense. We think it is absurd to think about this possibility. Right, we're moving forwards almost an entire year now, and we're going to look at the 1st of September 2020. A lot of analysis had been done in this time in terms of the whole disappearance really, but here's what the family lawyer had said according to The Sun. We know that she had passed away 4 days prior to being found in the flowing stream. Interesting. Now, if that's accurate, I don't know how to provide any meaningful explanation. Remember, the area where her body was found was searched just a couple of days before she was found. She wasn't there. So if she passed away days before the first search of the area, then how did she get there? Was she just missed? Maybe, but as the searcher said, there was no foliage at all covering her. I would also point out that because of Nora's disability, it's very difficult to imagine that she made it 1.6 miles away with only cuts on her feet. The searcher, who literally lives in the area, said that his boots were absolutely destroyed. That is so odd. Also, an important point was that her clothes were never found, so where in the world did they end up? On the 12th of November, another point in regards to the condition of the feet was made by a family member and reported by The Guardian. This is what was said. Nora's father said that when he identified Nora's body, he noticed that her feet were dirty but not injured in the way that would be expected had she have walked barefoot through the jungle for days. Police maintain that their investigation found no sign of criminal activity, and there was no indication that she'd been taken. Nora's mother and father have criticised the police. So other than being dirty and the cuts, her feet were in good condition in terms of not being injured. That hardly sounds like someone who's managed to wade through 1.6 miles of harsh terrain only to be found basically uninjured. Right, let's move to the 30th of November now, and I want to quote the Daily Mail, who heard from a British pathologist who performed the second autopsy. This is what was said. Nathaniel Kari, a British pathologist who performed a second post-mortem on Nora's body, said the Malaysian post-mortem had been thorough, and he agreed with Malaysia's findings that the teenager had passed away as a result of intestinal problems due to starvation and stress. But still, he added, it was difficult to ascertain in what circumstances the passing occurred due to decomposition. He agreed with Nora's family lawyer that foreign DNA, if it exists, could have been washed away, as her feet and hands were immersed in water for a few days before the body was found. Asked by the family lawyer, he could not exclude the possibility that her body may have been placed at the site where it was found after her passing, given that rescuers searched that specific location. He also agreed that there was no evidence that Nora had any major faults in the rough terrain despite her physical disabilities. However, Carey told the Malaysian Virtual Inquest that the multiple lacerations and scratches on Nora's body indicated that she had moved through the dense undergrowth. The cuts on her feet were not trivial, he said. I'm going to end with these final bits. This was the coroner, Maimuna Aid's final conclusions. After hearing all of the relevant evidence, I rule that there was no one involved in the passing of Nora Ann. It's more probable than not that she passed away by misadventure. Maimuna said there were no suspicious circumstances prior to the disappearance. There were no ransom requests and no signs of intrusion. The teenager probably left the accommodation on her own and subsequently got lost. For me to speculate and presume of her actions and involvement of a third party without any proof, that would be a breach of my duty, so the inquiry is hereby closed. Here's the family's response. Once again, we see that justice struggles to support the most vulnerable in society, only engaging with special needs at a surface level and not at the level that truly reflects children like Nora. We believe we have fought not just for Nora, but in honour of all the special needs children in this world who deserve our most committed support and the most careful application of justice. This is Nora's unique legacy, and we will never let it go. I then found that it looks like the family are set to challenge the inquest rulings and are lawyering up in the hopes to find answers. I looked around, but I couldn't find any way to support the family, so it doesn't look like there are any kind of donations set up. Right, with all of that being said, those are all of the facts that I'm aware of surrounding Nora's disappearance. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive, and now I'm going to hand it over to you in the comments section for some discussion. I'd just like to say thank you for watching, and please do subscribe and give the video a thumbs up if you thought I did a good job with this one, or a thumbs down if you thought I didn't. I'm just looking for your honest opinion. I'd also just like to say a massive thank you to the patrons who literally help me keep sane, so thank you very much for your support. Other than that, I hope you've had a good day or evening depending on where you are, and I'll see you next time. Be safe guys. Peace.